Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Dandavat pranams. Thank you for joining in for our Krishna book study session. We're almost on the last few chapters of the Krishna book. These are all quite long chapters. So we want to complete Krishna book and then start with Ramayana. So that's why we are having sessions Saturday, Sunday, probably Monday, Tuesday also. We may continue with Krishna book only. So we are on chapter number 87, prayers by the personified Vedas, right? We are seeing how the Vedas personified, the Sanat Kumaras are actually praising the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they're saying, Ye tamam prapadyante tam set vijamhim is not partiality, right? It is said, Prabhupada explains in a lecture that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He also has emotions, he has feelings, he also wants to reciprocate with those who are completely surrendered to him, just like we also do that, right? When somebody is helping us, when somebody is affectionate towards us, then we are also affectionate towards them, right? And the Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although Prabhupada also gives the example of how the rain, right? The rain falls on all the places, whether it is a desert or whether it is a plain or it is a land or it is a plateau, whatever it may be. But in the desert area, there is no growth. Whereas if the soil is fertile, then there is very wonderful vegetation that grows in that particular area. So the Lord's mercy is there for all of us, but those who are engaged in devotional service are able to access the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's what is given here. And that, what is the difference? The difference is that the atheist sees the Lord as death, whereas the theist or the devotee sees the Lord as the ultimate protector. Bhoktaram, Yajñatapasam, Sarvalokam, Maheshwaram, Soradam, Sarvabhutanam, Nyatwamam, Shanti Pritchati, like that. Okay. So let's continue. Devotees would like to read, can raise your hands. We are continuing from chapter number 87 of the Krishna book. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, Karpaguli Mataji, go ahead. The personified Vedas continue to pray. Dear Lord.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji.
Oh, one second.
Shall I start, Mataji?
Yes, Mataji, go ahead.
The personified Vedas continue to pray. Dear Lord, they said, from all Vedic information, it is understood that you are the supreme controller. Am I audible, Mataji?
Yes, go ahead, Mataji.
From all Vedic information, it is understood that you are the supreme controller and all living entities are controlled. Both the Lord and the living entities are called Nitya, internal, and so are qualitatively one. Yet the singular Nitya or the Supreme Lord is the controller, whereas the plural Nityas are controlled. The individual controlled living entity resides within the body, and the supreme controller as supersoul is also present there. But the supersoul controls the individual soul. That is the verdict of the Vedas. If the individual soul were not controlled by the supersoul, then how could one explain the Vedic version that a living entity transmigrates from one body to another and enjoys or suffers the effects of his past deeds, sometimes being promoted to a higher standard of life and sometimes being degraded to a lower standard? Thus, the conditioned souls are not only under the control of the Supreme Lord, but are also conditioned by control of the material nature. This relationship of the living entities with the Supreme Lord as a control and the controller definitely proves that although the supersoul is all pervasive, the individual living entities are never all pervasive. If the individual souls were all pervasive, there would be no question of their being controlled. The theory that the supersoul and the individual soul are equal is therefore polluted conclusion, and no sensible person accepts it. Rather, one should try to understand the distinctions between the supreme internal and the subordinate eternals. The personified Vedas therefore concluded, O Lord, you are the unlimited eternal, Dhruva, and the living entities are the limited eternals. The form of the unlimited eternal is sometimes conceived as a universal form, and in Vedic literatures like the Upanishads, the form of the limited eternal is vividly described. It is said therein that the Original spiritual form of the living entity is 1/10,000 of the size of the tip of a hair. It is also stated that that spirit is greater than the greatest and the smaller than the smallest. The individual living entities who are eternally part and parcel of God are smaller than the smallest. With our material senses, we can perceive neither the supreme, who is greater than the greatest, nor the individual soul, who is smaller than the smallest. From the authoritative sources of Vedic literature, we have to understand from both him who is greater than the greatest and him who is smaller than the smallest. The Vedic literature states that the supersoul is sitting within the heart of every living entity's body and is as big as a thumb. Therefore, the argument may be put forward, how can something the size of a thumb be accommodated within the heart of an ant? The answer is that this thumb measurement of the supersoul is imagined in proportion to the body of the living entity. In no circumstance, therefore, can the supersoul and the individual living entity can be taken as one, although both of them enter within the material body of a living entity. The supersoul lives within the heart to direct control the living individual living entity. Although both are Durva or eternal, the living entity is always under the direction of the Supreme. It may be argued that because the living entities are born of the material nature, they are all equal and independent. In the Vedic literature, however, it is said the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates the material nature with the living entities and then they come out. Therefore, the appearance of the individual living entities is not factually due to material nature alone. Just as a child produced by a woman is not her independent production. A woman is first impregnated by the man and then a child is produced. As such, the child is produced by the woman is part and parcel of the man. Similarly, the living entities are apparently produced by the material nature but not independently. It is due to the impregnation of the material nature by the Supreme Father that the living entities are present. Therefore, the argument that the individual living entities are not part and parcels of the Supreme cannot understand. Therefore, the indifferent parts of the body cannot be taken as equal to the whole. Rather, the whole body is the controller of the different limbs. Similarly, the part and parcels of the Supreme Whole are always dependent on or always controlled by the source of the parts and parcels. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the living entities are part and parcels of Krishna. Mam evas, mamaiva amchaha. No sane man therefore will accept the theory that the super soul and the individual soul are of the same category. They are equal in quality, but quantitatively the super soul is always the supreme and the individual soul is always subordinate to the super soul. This is the conclusion of the Vedas. The significant, shall I continue, Mataji? The significant word used in this connection is Yan Maya or Chinmaya. The Sanskrit Yanmaya or Chinmaya. In Sanskrit grammar, the word Maya is used in the sense of transformation and also in the sense of fullness. Mayavadi philosophers interpret that the word Yanmaya or Chinmaya indicates that the living entity is always equal to the Supreme. But one has to consider whether this affix Maya is used for the fullness or for transformation. Living entity never possesses anything exactly in the same proportion as the Supreme Personality of the Godhead. Therefore, this Maya affix cannot be used to mean the individual living entity is quantitatively equal to the with the Lord. The individual living entity never has full knowledge. Otherwise, how could he have come under the control of a Maya or the material energy? The word fullness can be accepted, therefore, only in proportion to the magnitude of the living entity. The spiritual oneness of the Supreme Lord and the living entities is never to be accepted as homogeneity. Each and every living entity is individual. If homogeneous oneness is accepted, then by the liberation of one individual soul or other individual souls, would have been liberated immediately. But the fact is that every individual soul is differently enjoying and suffering in the material world. As mentioned above, the
Hare
word
Krishna.
mind. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you.
Hare Paul. So, what is that? Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman, right? So, it is mentioned here that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also a living entity. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is also Satchit Ananda, whereas we, as part and parcels of Krishna, we are also Satchit Ananda, but we are infinitesimal, right? Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. We also have Chetana, we also have consciousness. We are also eternal, just like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman. But one is the maintainer and the others are being maintained by that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we are the individual jivas, infinitesimal jivas, who are always maintained by that eternal Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Lord Sri Krishna, who is also who is Janmaya and Chinmaya. That is Mayat. Mayat means in abundance, right? And the Supreme Personality of Godhead has got everything in abundance, whereas we have the same quality as that the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, we have everything in minute quantity. The Lord has an abundance, we have in minute quantity. That is why we are qualitatively equal with the Lord, but quantitatively we are not equal with the Lord, right? That means in magnitude we are not equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whereas in the quality or in terms of characteristics, we are equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is why we get controlled by Maya, but the Lord does not get controlled by Maya. Why? Because the Lord is completely energetic, completely supreme, and he controls Maya completely. Whereas the living entity, since is not supremely powerful, is not supremely independent, is dependent upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and also being a part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes such a person, such a jiva may also get entangled under the complexities of the material world, getting trapped under the illusions of Maya. How is that possible? Because the Maya energy is the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas the Jiva Tattva, they are marginal energy of the Lord, right? So in that way, the marginal energy of the Lord may be influenced by the illusions of this world, but the Lord himself cannot be influenced by Maya. So that's what it is, the important crux of this particular section. All right, let's move ahead. Yes, Mataji, 1 second. Yeah. All right. So now we are going to, the Prabhupada is going to describe here on the meaning of the word Mayat. Mayat means is used in the sense of transformation. 1 second, let me share my screen. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes, Vijayalakshmi Priya Mataji, you want to read? Let me share my screen here. Yeah, go ahead, Mataji.
As mentioned above, the word Maya is also used in the sense of transformation. Sometimes it is also used to mean byproduct. The impersonalist theory is that Brahman himself has accepted different types of bodies and that this is his Leela or pastime. There are, however, many hundreds and thousands of species of life in different standards of living conditions, such as human beings, demigods, animals, birds, and bees. And if all of them are plenary expansion of the Supreme Absolute Truth, then there would be no question of liberation, because Brahman would already be liberated. Another interpretation put forward by the Mayavadis is that in every millennium, different types of bodies are manifest. And when the millennium is closed, all the different bodies or expansions of Brahman automatically become one, ending all different manifestation. Then in the next millennium, according to this theory, Brahman again expands in different bodily forms. If we accept this theory, then Brahman becomes subject to change. But this cannot be accepted. From the Vedanta Sutra, we understand that Brahman is by nature joyful. He cannot, therefore, change himself into a body which is subject to so many painful conditions. Actually, the living entities are infinitesimal parts and parcels of Brahman, and as such, they are prone to be covered by the illusory energy. As explained before, The particles of Brahman are like sparks blissfully dancing within a fire. But there is a chance of their falling from the fire to smoke, although smoke is another condition of fire. This material world is just like smoke, and the spiritual world is like blazing fire. The innumerable living entities are prone to fall down to the material world from the spiritual world when influenced by the illusory energy. And it is also possible for the living entities to be liberated again when, by cultivation of real knowledge, he becomes completely freed from the contamination of the material world. The theory of the Asuras is that the living entities are born of material nature or Prakriti in touch with the Purusha. This theory also cannot be accepted because both the material nature and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are e- eternally exist. Neither the material nature nor the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be born. The Supreme Lord is known as Aja or unborn. Similarly, the material nature is called Aja. Both these terms, Aja and Aja, means unborn. Because both the material nature and the Supreme Lord are unborn, it is not possible that they can beget the living entities. But it is accepted in the Vedic literature that as water in contact with air sometimes present innumerable bubbles, so a combination of a material nature and the Supreme Person causes the appearance of the living entities within this material world. As bubbles in the water appear in different shapes, the living entities also appear in material world in different shapes and conditions, influenced by the modes of material nature. Therefore, it is not improper to conclude that the living entities appearing within this material world in different shapes, such as human beings, demigods, animals, birds, and beasts, all get their respective bodies due to different desires. No one can say when such desires were awakened in them, and therefore it is said, Anadi Karma. The cause of such material existence is untraceable. No one knows when material life began, but it is a fact that it does have a point of beginning, because originally every living entity is a spiritual spark. As a spark falling onto the ground from the fire has a beginning, so the living entities coming to this material world has a beginning. But no one can say when. Even though during the time of dissolution, all the conditions living entities remain merged within the spiritual existence of the Lord, as if in a deep sleep, their original desire it, to lord it over the material nature do not subside. Again, when there is a cosmic manifestation, they come out to fulfill the same desires, and therefore they appear in different species of life. The living entities merge into the Supreme at the time of dissolution are compared to honey. In the honeycomb, the taste of different flowers are conserved. When one drinks honey, one cannot distinguish what sort of honey has been collected from what sort of flower. But the palatable taste of the honey perceives that the honey is
Suppose
not homogeneous, but it is combination of different tastes. Another example is that although different rivers ultimately mix with the water of the sea, this does not mean that the individual identities of the river are thereby lost. Although the water of the Ganges and the water of the Yamuna mix with the water of the sea, the river Ganges and river Yamuna still continue to exist independently. The merging of different living entities into Brahman at the time of dissolution involves the dissolution of different types of bodies. But the living entities, along with their different tastes, remain individually submerged in Brahman until another manifestation of the material world. As the salty taste of seawater and the sweet taste of Ganges water are different, and this difference continuously exists, so the difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities continuously exists. Even though at the time of dissolution they appear to merge, the conclusion is
conclusion
therefore
is
that
therefore.
even therefore that even when the living entities become free from all contamination of material condition and merge into spiritual kingdom, their individual taste and relationship with the Supreme Lord continues to exist. The personified Vedas continued. Dear Lord, it is therefore our conclusion that all living entities are attracted by your material energy and that only due to their mistakenly identifying themselves as product of the material nature are they transmigrating from one kind of body to another in forgetfulness of their eternal relationship with you. Because of ignorance, these living entities misidentify themselves in different species of life. And especially when elevated to the human form of life, they identify with a particular class of men, or a particular nation, or a race, or a so called religion, forgetting their real identity as eternal servant of your Lordship. Due to these faulty conceptions of life, they are undergoing repeated birth and death. Out of many millions of them, if one becomes intelligent enough by associating with pure devotees, he comes to the understanding of Krishna consciousness and comes out of the jurisdictions of the material misconception. In Chaitanya
Hare Krishna.
Charitamrita,
Thank you,
Hari Bol,
Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare Krishna. So here we are seeing that the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be understood by our material intelligence. Sevon mukehi jivado swayameva surati adaha. It comes to the understanding of only the pure devotees of the Lord by the causeless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. What is that? Bahunam janmanamante jnanaman mam prapadyate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. It is only in the hearts of these Mahatma who are Durlabha, who are very rare, can the Supreme Personality of Godhead be completely manifest and who can be worshipped by such devotees, right? So these are the concluding sections of the personified Vedas where they are talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities, relationship between them, and how we understand our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead as that of a part and a whole, right? We are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself is the complete whole, out of which we are all parts and parcels, like that. Okay, Hare Krishna. So let's move ahead. Just one second. Let me share my screen. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Okay, so now here from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, what is specified here? For some reason it's moving down. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Okay, Sindhu Mataji can read now. Just one second. Yes, Sindhu Mataji, you can continue. Haribol.
Yes,
Chaitanya Charitamrita. Hare Krishna. Then Pranam Mataji. Yes.
To read from this paragraph. Hare Krishna Prabhupada ki jai. The personified Vedas continue.
In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is confirmed by Lord Chaitanya.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
No. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yeah, I'm reading. Am I audible? The Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is confirmed by Lord Chaitanya.
Yes, Mataji.
In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is confirmed by Lord Chaitanya that the living entities are wandering within this universe in different species of life, but that if one of them becomes intelligent enough by the mercy of the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, then he begins his devotional life in Krishna consciousness. It is said, Harim Vinanam Ritim Taranti. Without the help of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot get out of the clutches of the repeated birth and death. In other words, only the Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, can relieve the conditioned souls from the cycle of birth and death. The personified Vedas continued. The influence of time, past, present, and future, and the material miseries such as excessive heat, excessive cold, birth, death, old age, and disease are all simply the movements of your eyebrows. Everything is working under your direction. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita that all material activity is going on under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. The Vedas continued, all the conditions of material existence are opposing elements for persons who are not surrendered unto you. But for those who are surrendered souls and are in full Krishna consciousness, these things cannot be a source of fear. When Lord Narsingadeva appeared, Prahlad Maharaja was never afraid of him, whereas his atheist father was immediately faced with death personified and was killed. Therefore, although Lord Narsingadeva appears as death for an atheist like Hiranyakashipu, he is always kind and is the reservoir of all pleasure for devotees like Prahlada. A pure devotee is not therefore afraid of birth, death, old age, and disease. Sripada Sridhara Swami has composed a nice verse in this regard, the meaning of which is as follows. My dear Lord, I am a living entity perpetually disturbed by the conditions of material existence. I have been cracked to pieces by the smashing wheel of material existence, and because of my various sinful activities, while existing in this material world, I am burning in the blazing fire of material reactions. Somehow or the other, my dear Lord, I have come to take shelter under your lotus feet. Please accept me and give me protection. Srila Narottama Das Thakura also prays like this. My dear Lord, O son of Nanda Maharaja, associated with the daughter of Vrishabhanu, I have come to take shelter under your lotus feet after suffering greatly in the material condition of life, and I pray that you please be merciful upon me. Please do not kick me away, for I have no other shelter than you. The conclusion is that any process of self-realization or God realization other than Bhakti Yoga or devotional service is extremely difficult. Taking shelter of devotional service to the Lord in full Krishna consciousness is therefore the only way to become free from the contamination of material, conditioned life, especially in this age. Those who are not in Krishna consciousness are simply wasting their time and they have no tangible proof of spiritual life. It is said by Lord Ramachandra, I always give confidence and security to anyone who surrenders unto me and decides definitely that he is my eternal servant, for that is my natural inclination. Similarly, Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the influence of the material nature is insurmountable, but anyone who surrenders unto me can verily overcome the influence of material nature. The devotees are not at all interested in arguing with the non-devotees to nullify their theories. Rather than wasting time, they always engage themselves in the transcendental loving service of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness. The personified Vedas continued, Dear Lord, although great mystic yogis may have full control over the elephant of the mind and the hurricane of the senses, unless they take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, they fall victim to the material influence and are never successful in their attempts at self-realization. Such unguided persons are compared to merchants going to sea on a ship without a captain. By one's personal attempts, therefore, one cannot get free from the clutches of material nature. One has to accept a bona fide spiritual master and work according to his direction. Then it is possible to cross over the nescience of material conditions. Sripada Sridhara Swami has composed a nice verse in this connection in which he says, O all merciful spiritual master, representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when my mind will be completely surrendered unto your lotus feet, at that time, Only by your mercy, I shall be able to get relief from all obstacles to spiritual life, and I shall be situated in blissful life. Actually,
continue,
ecstatic samadhi. Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Shall I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
Actually, ecstatic samadhi or absorption in the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be achieved by constant engagement in His service. And this constant engagement in devotional service can be performed only when one works under the direction of a bona fide spiritual master. The Vedas therefore instruct that in order to know the signs of devotional service, one has to submit himself unto the bona fide spiritual master. The bona fide spiritual master is he who knows the signs of devotional service in disciplic succession. This disciplic succession is called Shrotriya. Shrotriya. The prime symptom of one who has become a spiritual master in disciplic succession is that he is 100% fixed in Bhakti Yoga. Sometimes people neglect to accept a spiritual master and instead they endeavor for self-realization by mystic yoga practice. But there are many instances of failure even by great yogis like Vishwamitra. Arjuna said in the Bhagavad Gita that controlling the mind is as impractical as stopping the blowing of a hurricane. Sometimes the mind is compared to a maddened elephant. Without following the direction of a spiritual master, one cannot control the mind and the senses. In other words, if one practices yoga mysticism and does not accept a bona fide spiritual master, he will surely fail. He will simply waste his valuable time. The Vedic injunction is that no one can have full knowledge without being under the guidance of an acharya. Acharyavan Purusho Veda. One who has accepted the acharya knows what is what. The absolute truth cannot be understood by arguments. One who has attained the perfect Brahminical stage naturally becomes renounced. He does not strive for material gain because by spiritual knowledge he has come to the conclusion that in this world there is no insufficiency. Everything is sufficiently provided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A real Brahmana therefore does not endeavor for material perfection. Rather, he approaches a bona fide spiritual master to accept orders from him. A spiritual master's qualification is that he is Brahmanishta, which means that he has given up all other activities and has dedicated his life to working only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. When a bona fide student approaches a bona fide spiritual master, he submissively prays to the spiritual master, "My dear Lord, kindly accept me as your student and train me in such a way that I will be able to give up all the other processes of self-realization and simply engage in Krishna consciousness, devotional service."
Hare Krishna.
The devotee.
So,
Thank you.
thank you. Hare Krishna. So, a lot of important points have been covered in the last couple of paragraphs. Right? Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kankshati. So, how does one attain the stage of no lamentation and no hankering? Simply by surrendering to bona fide spiritual master. Again, we're going back to Bhagavad Gita 4.34. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena seveya upadikshyanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Again, we're going back to 4.2. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarsyo viduhu sakalineha mahata yogo nashtaha parantapa. This spiritual knowledge is given in disciplic succession and the saintly kings have received in that way. Right? Krishna tells Arjuna that because this lineage or this distribution of knowledge is lost because of the passage of time, I am again giving you this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. Right? And this real process of Bhagavad Gita, which is recommended as devotional service, it can be attained only by those who listen to the bona fide spiritual master, serve the spiritual master, and also take instructions from the spiritual master, surrender to the spiritual master. In such a way, if a person engages in devotional service, then automatically one will be elevated to the platform of pure devotional service under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. All right. Anyone else would like to read? Can raise your hands. So quickly, let me start sharing the screen. There's some problem with the laptop today. Somehow it is going back to the original thing itself. Yeah. Okay. So a devotee engaged with the direction of the spiritual master. And let me share my screen. Okay. Where did I go? Okay, once again. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Yeah. Yeah, so one will be able to give up all other process of realization and be able to be situated in devotional service only when one has the bona fide, the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master like that. Okay, for some reason, it's my alt tab is not working. It's going somewhere else. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Okay, so what does a devotee who surrendered to the spiritual master, what does he contemplate on and what are his thoughts? That is what is the next paragraph. Okay, Archana Shri Radhika Mataji, go ahead. The devotee engaged with the direction of the spiritual master from there.
The devotee, engaged by the direction of the spiritual master in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, contemplates as follows. My dear Lord, you are the reservoir of pleasures. Since you are present, what is the use of the transient pleasure derived from society, friendship, and love? Persons unaware of supreme reservoir of pleasure falsely engage in deriving pleasure from sense gratification, but this is transient and illusory. In this connection, Vidyapati, a great Vaishnava devotee and poet, says, My dear Lord, undoubtedly there is some pleasure in the midst of society, friendship, and love, although it is materially conceived, but such pleasure cannot satisfy my heart, which is like a desert. In a desert, there is a need of an ocean of water. But if only a drop of water is poured on the desert, what is the value of such water? Similarly, our material hearts are full of multi desires, which cannot be fulfilled by materialistic society, friendship, and love. When our hearts begin to derive pleasure from the supreme reservoir of pleasure, then we can be satisfied. That transcendental satisfaction is possible only in devotional service and full Krishna consciousness. The personified Vedas continued, Dear Lord, you are Sachidananda Vigraha, the ever blissful form of knowledge, and because the living entities are parts and parcels of your personality, their natural state of existence is to be fully conscious of you. In this material world, anyone who has developed such Krishna consciousness is no longer interested in materialistic way of life. A Krishna conscious being becomes uninterested in family life where there is some concession for sense enjoyment. In other words, he is no longer interested in sense gratification. The perfection of human life is based on knowledge and renunciation, but it is very difficult to attempt to reach the stage of knowledge and renunciation while in family life. Krishna conscious person therefore takes shelter of association of devotees or sanctified places of pilgrimage. Such persons are aware of relationship between supersoul and individual living entity, and they are never in bodily concept of life because they always carry you in full consciousness within their hearts. They are so purified that any place they go becomes a holy place of pilgrimage, and the water which washes their feet is able to deliver many sinful persons loitering within this material world. When Prahlada Maharaja was asked by his aesthetic father, atheistic father to describe something very good which he had learned, he replied to his father, for a materialistic person who is always full of anxieties due to being engaged in temporary and relative truth, the best course is to give up the blind well of family life and go to the forest to take the shelter of the Supreme Lord. Those who are actually pure devotees are celebrated as Mahatmas or great sages, personalities perfect in knowledge. They always think of Supreme Lord and his lotus feet, and thus they automatically become liberated. Devotees who are always situated in that position become electrified by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord, and thus they themselves become the source of liberation for their followers and devotees. A Krishna conscious person is fully electrified spiritually, and therefore anyone who touches or takes the shelter of such pure devotee becomes similarly electrified with spiritual potencies. Such devotees are never puffed up with material opulence. Generally, the material opulence are good parentage, education, beauty, and riches, But although a devotee of the Lord may possess all four of these material opulence, he is never carried away by pride of possessing such distinctions. Great devotees of the Lord travel all over the world from one place of pilgrimage to another, and on their way they meet many conditioned souls, delivered them by their association and distribution of transcendental knowledge. They generally reside in the places like Vrindavana, Mathura, Dwaraka, Jagannath Puri, and Navadvipa because only devotees assemble in such places. In this way, they give saintly association to one another and thus advance, so that every living entity can take advantage of association of Krishna conscious person. Such great devotees open temples and ashramas where Krishna's devotees assemble. By such association, people can develop more and more in Krishna consciousness. Such advancement is not possible in ordinary household life, which is devoid of Krishna consciousness. Mataji,
Hare
should I
Krishna. Thank you,
thank?
Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Very
Dandavat
powerful. Tirthi kurvanti tirthani. Right? The sadhus are said to be the moving tirthas, right? Why? Because they move from one tirtha to another, not to purify themselves, but they purify the particular place where they are visiting, right? That is the consciousness, or that is the level of purity of Mahabhagavatas, right? When the Mahabhagavatas, they go to a particular place, what do? They sanctify that particular place. It is not that they themselves get purified, right? And it is also mentioned in the same verse that somebody who goes, right, goes to a dham and only takes bath in the dham and is coming back, right? He said, "Sa eva gokaraha." He's supposed to be like a cow or an ass, right? Because a cow or an ass, when it goes to a pilgrimage center, what does it do? Probably it may just take bath. But people who are born as human beings, when they go to the dham, what is their consciousness? What should the consciousness be? The consciousness when you're going to a dham, whether it is Pandharpur dham or Jagannath Puri dham or Mayapur Navdeep dham or Vrindavan dham, wherever we are going, right? What should be our conscience? Our consciousness should be that we should hear about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in these places. So as we hear about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we become purified of all of our anarthas. Because when we remember Krishna, right? When we remember Krishna, then what happens? When we hear about Krishna, we are able to remember Krishna. When we are able to remember Krishna, then wherever we are situated, whether we are situated in Bombay, whether we are situated in Pune or Bangalore or Chennai or Middle East or United States, right? We are situated in a tirtha. But if we are actually situated in a tirtha, but we don't hear about the glories of the Lord, then we are as good as a cow or a sa eva gokaraha, as a cow or an ass, right? Because we are not taking the real benefit of the dham, right? So the purpose of going to the dham is to take shelter of the devotees and hear Krishna Katha from the bona fide devotees, so that our mind can be fixed in the transcendental consciousness, like that. Okay. Then let's move to the last section. Anyone else wants to read? The personified Vedas continued. Dear Lord, there are two classes of transcendentalists, the impersonalists and the personalists. The opinion of the impersonalists is that this material manifestation is false and that only the absolute truth is factual. The view of the personalists, however, is that the material world, although very temporary, is nevertheless not false but factual. Such transcendentalists have different arguments to establish the validity of their philosophies. Factually, the material world is simultaneously both truth and untruth. It is truth because everything is an expansion of the supreme absolute truth, and it is untruth because the existence of the material world is temporary, it is created and it is annihilated. Because of its different conditions of existence, the cosmic manifestation is no fixed position. Those who advocate acceptance of this material world as false are generally known as the maxim Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. They put forward the argument that everything in the material world is prepared from matter. For example, there are many things of clay, such as earthen pots, dishes, and bowls. After annihilation, these things may be transformed into any other material objects. But in all cases, their existence as clay continues. An earthen water jug, after being broken, may be transformed into a bowl or a dish. But either as a dish or a bowl or a water jug, the earth itself continues to exist. Therefore, the forms of a water jug or a bowl or the dish are false, but their existence or but their existence as earth is real. This is the impersonalist version. This cosmic manifestation is certainly produced from the absolute truth, but because its existence is temporary, it is said to be false. The impersonalists understand that the absolute truth is always present, is the only truth. In the opinion of other transcendentalists, however, this material world being produced, the absolute truth is also truth. The impersonalists argue that this is fallacious because it is sometimes found that the matter produced from the spirit soul and sometimes that spirit soul is produced from matter. Such philosophers push forward the argument that although cow dung is dead matter, sometimes it is found that scorpions come out of cow dung. Similarly, dead matter like nails and hair come out of the material body, come out of the living body. Therefore, things produced of a certain thing are not always the same quality as that thing. On the strength of this argument, Mayavadi philosophers try to establish that although this cosmic manifestation is certainly an emanation from the absolute truth, the cosmic manifestation does not necessarily have any truth in it. According to this view, the absolute Brahman should therefore be accepted as truth, whereas the cosmic manifestation, although a product of the absolute truth, cannot be taken to be truth. The view of the Mayavadi philosophers, however, is stated in the Bhagavad Gita to be the view of the Asuras, or the demons. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Asatyam apratishthaham te jagat ahur anishwaram aparaspara sambhutam kim anyat kama haitukam. The Asuras' view of this cosmic manifestation is that the whole creation is false. The Asuras think that the mere interaction of matter is the source of the creation and that there is no controller or God. But actually, this is not the fact. From the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we understand that the 5 gross elements, namely Bhumi, Rapo, Nalo, Vayu, right? And the subtle elements, Kam, Mano, Buddhi, Revacha, are the 6 separate energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Beyond this inferior material energy is a spiritual energy. Beyond this inferior material energy is a spiritual energy, beyond, known as the living entities. The living entities are accepted as the superior energy of the Lord. The whole cosmic manifestation is a combination of the inferior and the superior energies, and the source of the energies is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has many different types of energies. This is confirmed in the Vedas. Parasya Shakti Vividaiva Shruyate. The transcendental energies of the Lord are variegated, and because these varieties of energies have emanated from the Supreme Lord, they cannot be false. The Lord is ever existing and the energies are ever existing. Some of the energy is temporary, sometimes manifested and sometimes unmanifested. Does not mean that the Lord is false. The example we given that when a person is angry, he does things which are different from his normal condition of life. But the fact that the mood of anger appears and disappears does not mean that the energy of anger is false. Therefore, the argument of the Mayavadi philosopher, this world is false, is not accepted by the Vaishnava philosophers. The Lord himself confirms that the view that there is no supreme cause of this material manifestation, that there is no God, and that everything is only the creation of the interaction of matter is the view of the Asuras. So let's end here. So how are Asuras and Suras distinguished? Asuras are demigods and Suras are the demons. Right? Whenever we worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead with various paraphernalia, including tulasi, including water, right? When we are worshipping the deities, then what happens? Automatically, we are able to understand that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. Slowly but surely, that understanding will come to us. But if you are not interested in understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but we simply want to puna shadvita charvananam, we simply want to go through the motions of life, right? According to what we want to do, according to what we are doing, according to what is convenient to us, then we are not acting within the internal energy of the Lord, right? Because we simply want to be in the Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, right? But Parasya Shakti Vividaiva Shruyate, when we understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has got multifarious energies, I as Jiva Tattva is also an energy of the Supreme Lord. The material world, which is the entire Mahamaya and Yogamaya, they are also expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead is only with the process of rendering devotional service, right? And to understand the Bahiranga Shakti of the Lord, the Antaranga Shakti of the Lord, and also the Tatastha Shakti of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we understand that the process of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead is to take shelter of the spiritual master and sing the glories of Harinam Sankirtan for the pleasure of Radha Krishna, for the pleasure of Gaur Nitai. And in this way, we can perfect our life. Because there is no other way, there is no other way for perfection of life. Hare Krishna, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. So devotees can switch on your cameras if possible. We'll do 2-3 minutes of Harinam Sankirtan and we'll end. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Satyarishadharine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Advaita Garadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Gaura Nitai Jai Jai Jagannath Jai Jai Baladev Jai Jai Subhadra Jai Jai Sudarshan Jaya Bala Gopal Jai Viఠ્ઠલ Jaya Radha Singh Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol हरि नाम संकीर्तन महायज्ञ की जय। जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद श्री गुरुदेव की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णवा वृंद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णवा वृंद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे Hari Hari Bol. So thank you devotees for joining in. Tomorrow we'll meet you all at 5 o'clock for the Brahma Muhurta chanting session. And tomorrow is Sunday. We'll post in the group what is the time for our study of the Krishna books. Thank you for logging in at different times. By the end of this month, our Zoom ID is also expiring. So we have spoken to some devotees to collaborate and use the Zoom ID. So accordingly, we will announce the timings. So by until 31st, we will mostly do it in the evening at 7:30 p.m. or we may do it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'll keep you all posted. Thank you very much for joining in. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrind ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Srila Gurudev ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Thank you devotees. Hare Krishna. Meet you all at 5.